Through the last number of weeks, one of the stories we have been following, well, the country's been following the issue in long-term care and retirement residences. This pandemic has been hitting them at alarming paces, and in some circumstances, just absolutely heartbreaking results time and time again. And here locally, the story came out, a couple of weeks ago now at the Lundy Manor. We were talking to an employee who used to work there as an outbreak started, and there were concerns over some of the precautions or non-precautions, I suppose, that were taken through the early stages of this pandemic. We know, I know the latest numbers that I remember hearing have brought in, what is it? I believe it's 19, believe it or not, or 18 maybe, deaths at Lundy Manor, which is absolutely heartbreaking. Some of the stories, there was a husband and wife, for crying out loud. There's been, a lot of people's family members who have lost their lives, and a lot of people question, the process. And that right from the get-go, when we were talking to the ex-employee over there, were they taking the proper, precautions to make sure that this COVID-19 wasn't spreading and wasn't hitting everybody? And now it looks like there's a possibility, anyway, of a lawsuit out there in one way, shape, or form. Gary Will is managing partner of Will Davidson LLP, personal injury law firm, and joins us on the program. Gary, how you doing?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
I'm all right. I know, I guess you guys have been in contact with some people talking about this, right?
Yes, we've heard from many families that have contacted us. We've heard from staff members that worked at Lundy Manor. And so we're continuing our investigation into this claim, and what we're finding is very disturbing.
What is I guess the process? Because ultimately this would line up to some sort of class action if possible, right? Like that's kind of how it would have to build up, I guess.
Yes, it could be individual claims, but because of the facts of this case, it lends itself towards a class action, and that's what we are working towards right now.
What's the process, I guess, of getting something like that together?
Well, you have to have one family that agrees to be representative plaintiff, and if the claim is then certified by the court, then the party would represent all family members. But that only occurs after certification of the class action.
Okay, but so you've had a number of families kind of reaching out to talk to you, but I guess nobody taking the burden of being that main voice, I guess, the main plaintiff, like you said?
Well, we have a number of families, and we actually now have a family that is prepared to go forward and be the representative plaintiff.
Oh, okay, so you do have somebody that's willing to do it now, then?
Yeah, we've had so many calls from so many people, and some were reluctant to be at the forefront of the litigation, but everybody is very interested in supporting a class action. And like I said, we now have a family that is prepared to be the representative plaintiff.
So what happens now then if they've said, hey, we will take that kind of, I keep calling it a burden, but I think it might feel like one, or a responsibility, like that now that you have somebody that's willing to take that on, what happens next?
Yeah, so we complete our investigation, and then the next step would be to issue the statement of claim. And we're very close to finalizing our claim at this point, but we want to get it right. And so there are a few additional pieces to the puzzle that we need to obtain some further information, but we should be ready to go very shortly.
I guess what are the sorts of things that you'll have to be able to prove through this? Like you would have to be able to prove some sort of negligence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The heart of this case is based on negligence. And from what we've discovered so far, the owners of Lundy Manor fell well below the standard of care. And that means that they should have been aware that there were problems. All they had to do was follow the Ontario government guidelines for long-term care facilities. And if you look back, as early as February the 3rd, the government of Ontario released guidelines for the prevention and screening of coronavirus in long-term care homes. Those guidelines were then updated February 28th and again on March the 9th. And basically those guidelines were to ensure that persons coming into long-term care homes were screened, that no one with coronavirus was to be allowed inside the home. The later guidelines did provide for social distancing. And if you look at what actually occurred at Lundy Manor, they were about a month, more than a month behind the Ontario government guidelines and most other long-term care homes. So what was occurring in Lundy Manor, they were still engaging in social activities. The girls' basketball team came into Lundy Manor on March the 13th. They had a pub night on March the 28th. They were continuing to serve meals in the dining room right up until the end of March. The residents were playing euchre and bingo, and they were all sharing a single elevator. So there was no social distancing going on during the month of March. It was only at the end of March that they started instituting policies and procedures that should have gone into effect at the beginning of March. So as a result, we have 18 deaths and 42 infections, and it's just a needless tragedy.
So do you basically just have to kind of prove, because when we think of the guidelines that the government have been putting down through all of this, I think we all understand, like, look, it's been a learning curve for some people, but will those kind of hold up in court, like as something that businesses should have been adhering to by the letter of the law, I guess?
Well, these guidelines are there for the benefit of everyone, and you're right, it is a learning curve, but it shouldn't be a 6-week learning curve in these long-term care homes. These people are very vulnerable, and they're dependent, and they put trust into the owners of Lundy Manor. They were vulnerable. They should have been provided with a safe environment, and they obviously were not. As a result, we have 18 families who are suffering as a result of needless deaths of their mothers and fathers. Some of these families actually lost both their mother and their father. And it's hard enough to lose one parent, but to lose both parents within a matter of days, that's a needless tragedy.
So what's obviously you mentioned that you continue the investigation now that you have somebody who's willing to take on that kind of main piece as being the main plaintiff. Is the idea or the hope that everybody signed? Like, how many other people would you possibly get to sign on to this? Are you thinking?
Well, there'd be as many as the 18 families, and we've talked to a large number of them, and we expect to receive phone calls from the remaining families in the near future, and we would be looking to represent and protect the interests of every family member that was affected.
I don't know if this is what you would have or if you would be able to give me this, but so you've got the one that says they'll be the main plaintiff. How many other families have they signed on or just said that they would be in? Like, I don't know how that even works, but
yeah, they've indicated to us that they're prepared to go forward and act as the representative plaintiff.
Yeah.
And we have many other families that are prepared to go along with the case, but they would prefer to remain in the background.
Can you give me the number of other families, or is that something you keep in?
We've been contacted by 5 family members to this point, and we've been contacted by a number of staff members at Lundy Manor, and we've been in contact with the local MPP's office as well and have obtained some information from them.
I don't know, and I haven't watched. But have you been seeing any other similar cases like this popping up and coming together across the country? Because we've talked about it many times with some of the situations that we've seen in Quebec. Some of the stuff that Bob Cajan's one of the ones in Ontario that certainly jumped out. Have any of these other places kind of created this type of legal framework?
We've certainly heard about incidents at other long-term care facilities. Lundy Manor seems to be one of the worst, quite frankly. We've also heard from other long-term care facilities who instituted measures at an early stage that have not suffered any deaths. So that's a pretty good indicator that if you had followed the standard of care and met the guidelines, this all could have been avoided.
It's been a scary kind of a story to be following over the last number of weeks. How long do you figure it could be before you file something in court?
We would be in a position to file our claim within the next week to 10 days.
Oh, wow. Okay. Could be quick, as everybody. I guess if there's any family members out there and they want to speak to you, just call the office, right?
Absolutely. We're prepared to provide free consultations to anyone that has any questions. And we'd certainly explain whatever options these family members have. And we also welcome witnesses who have information that would be germane to the case to contact us as well.
It's been a scary story for a lot of families out there. Has been absolutely gut-wrenching. Gary, thanks a lot for the chat this morning, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.